All right. Good evening. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name is Pat Kowitzel. I'm the buyer and author program coordinator at Magic City Books, and we are thrilled to be bringing you a virtual author event this evening with Kelli Jo Ford in conversation with Brandon Hobson, and we're going to get to that in just a moment, but I wanted to make a couple of plugs. First, we've been doing these virtual events since we started these on April 20th. It seems like we've been doing them since April 20th of maybe 2009 or so at this point. But we hope that we know that a lot of you are joining us on a pretty regular basis, and we thank you for that. We know that some of you are joining us from away from the Tulsa area, and so thank you for doing that. And we're glad that you found our events and hope that they're bringing you some entertainment and some comfort during these times. We've got a big program scheduled for the next couple of months. We were looking at our calendar today. We are pretty booked up through mid-September and on. And so we've got a lot of virtual events that are coming your way. A couple worth mentioning just in the very near future. This Saturday, we're doing kind of a special Saturday night event with Mike Berbiglia. Many of you may know him as a stand-up comedian and kind of he's written a number of one-man shows that have been produced on Broadway. And a few years ago, there was a contest that This American Life did to kind of be the understudy for that one-man show, kind of as a joke that if the one-man show performer can't go on, it's pretty hard to do a one-man show without the main guy. But a Tulsan actually won that prize and wound up going to New York and introducing Mike Berbiglia in front of the show. And so they've remained close, and this Zoom world has allowed for us to be able to do an event with Mike Berbiglia. So that's coming up on Saturday. That's a ticketed event. You just pay for the book, Mike Berbiglia's new book, The New One, and you get a ticket to attend the event and join us for the virtual event. Then Monday night, we're doing the book launch party for Richard Cox. Richard is a Tulsa writer who's written a number of books, and his newest one is called House of the Rising Sun. It's what I'm reading right now and turning the pages ferociously. Kind of a post-apocalyptic book, which feels kind of relevant for these times, but it's a different scenario that happens. It's not a virus. It also doesn't have any zombies or anything like it seems like most post-apocalyptic stuff has. This one is an electromagnetic pulse that kind of sets the action in motion. So that's going to be on Monday night. And then on Tuesday, Jax Miller is joining us for her book called Hell in the Heartland, which is a true crime case set in Oklahoma. Back about a little over 20 years ago, a fire and two girls that go missing and have never been recovered. And the case has been in the news a lot recently, as a lot of these true crime cases that get the book treatment, kind of like the Golden State Killer and some of the other ones do, that the book starts to set into motion renewed interest and more developments get made in the case. And so I'm sure we'll talk about that a lot as well. But a lot of good things that are coming for virtual events very, very soon. We're really thrilled to be joined tonight for tonight's event by Kelli Jo Ford. A couple of months ago, in my role as the buyer for the store, I was kind of notified about this book that was coming up, and we knew that we were going to be doing this mailbox subscription service that we started. We originally planned to start that in June. We wound up starting it in April, and so originally this was going to be our second selection, but it was one that we had selected a long time ago as definitely the one that we wanted to pick for July. And so we're really excited to have been able to bring that to our subscribers. And we're really excited to be able to bring a virtual event to everyone that's joining us tonight with Kelli Jo. I wanted to give just a quick plug to that. If you're joining us and not one of those Magic City Mailbox subscribers, our first book was The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel, and that book really took off and has been a really popular book. The second book we selected was called The Index of Self-Destructive Acts, and it's kind of this big mini characters New York novel. And then in June, we picked The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett, which of course has been the #1 book for much of the last month or so, or in the top 2 or 3 fiction bestsellers. And so, and then this excellent Crooked Hallelujah by Kelli Jo Ford. And so we think that we are 4 for 4 on our fiction picks. And I know that we're 1 for our last one. So we're really excited about that. There's going to be links in the chat to to join that program if you're interested, and you'd be starting with the August selection, and we've got that and more planned for that with the rest of the way. It's $100. You get a book mailed to you each month, brand new, hand selected by the staff at Magic City Books. And so we're really excited to be able to bring that to you. There's going to be links in the chat to be able to do that. In conversation with Kelli Jo tonight, we're welcoming kind of back to Tulsa, Brandon Hobson. Brandon is a good friend of ours, and we've done a couple of events with him in the past, and he's helped us out with moderating and kind of helping us out with the Tommy Orange event that many of you may have attended a little over a year ago when the paperback of There came out. Brandon is the author of Where the Dead Sit Talking, which was a finalist for the 2018 National Book Award and winner of Reading the West Award. He has won a Pushcart Prize. His fiction has appeared in numerous places, and he's currently an assistant professor of English at New Mexico State University and also teaches at the Institute of American Indian Arts, IAIA, in Santa Fe. He's an enrolled citizen of the Cherokee Nation tribe, and his brand new novel was just announced recently, The Removed, which is going to be coming out in February, and we're going to have links to pre-order that book as well. So Brandon will be moderating our event tonight, and he will be talking to Kelli Jo Ford, who we're all here and excited to hear more about her new book, Crooked Hallelujah, her debut novel. Kelli Jo is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. She is the recipient of numerous awards and fellowships, including the Paris Review's Plimpton Prize, the Everett Southwest Literary Award, the Catherine Bakeless Nason Award at Breadloaf, a National Artist Fellowship by the Native Arts and Cultures Foundation, and Adobe Paisano Fellowship. And her work has appeared in numerous places like the Paris Review and the Missouri Review and the Anthology 40 Stories from Harper Perennial. And so we are just thrilled to welcome Brandon Hobson and Kelli Jo Ford tonight. Thank you both for joining us.
Thanks so much, Pat.
Thanks, Pat. Appreciate that. And thanks to everybody for tuning in. And I had really the honor of reading Crooked Hallelujah back, a few months ago, sometime back in the winter, and really loved it. And I've been familiar with Kelli's work for a long time. We were actually in an anthology together back in 2012, 2011?
I think maybe 12. Yeah.
Maybe 2012, yeah, through Harper Perennial. And that was, I've been a fan of hers for a while, and she just joined us at a IAIA in the MFA low res program, which is exciting, and spoke to my class this afternoon. I had my workshop. And Crooked Hallelujah. So I want to ask you, Kelli, if you can, because I know you worked, this is a novel in stories, and I know you worked on it for a very long time. Mm-hmm. And can you talk a little bit about how the book came to be a book? Because originally you had stories, right? And how they became linked to become what we call a novel.
Sure, thank you. And also, I just want to say thank you to all of you who are joining us. I'm really excited to be here with Magic City Books and Brandon and all of you. I wish I could see you all, but I'm grateful that you're here. So yeah, the path to today, I guess my book has been published for a week and a day now. It took quite some time, well more than 10 years, because I didn't really realize I was writing a book for a long time. From the very first story I wrote, I know the very first story I wrote when I took an intro to creative writing class as a non-traditional student, I don't know how old I was, 25 or 26. I went back to school. They were characters from this town I'm writing about, from the North Texas fictional town called Bonita. And so almost every story I've written has taken place in the same places. So I think that first these were just stories that are arising kind of from land and landscapes and places. And I just kept writing them, and I kept writing short stories, and that was my goal. I thought of myself as a short story writer and didn't really aspire to write a novel. But as time went along and I found myself in the MFA program, I kept writing these stories from the same places, and eventually they began to come from the same family as well. And so it was just sort of a long, slow process. Eventually I realized that I had a linked collection. And through the process of working with my agent and figuring out what the best version of the book was going to be, it was to focus more on the family and to try to sort of work the narrative arc of the youngest. It's a book about 4 generations of Cherokee women in one family, and to try to work the arc of the youngest 2 in the family, Justine and Reney. Try to work their arc over the course of their lives, essentially. So that's how it sort of went from like, wow, this somewhat loose collection of stories, all from the same place, to a more focused book. It's still a novel in stories. It's not a traditional novel where you end a chapter one day and pick up in the next day, in the very next scene. Each chapter or story is hopefully a standalone piece, but that's sort of why it took so long, because I didn't necessarily aspire to write a novel or even realize that I was writing a book for a long time. I just tried to focus on writing one short story at a time to the best of my ability, and that was sort of my, I put all of my effort into one short story and then the next one. And eventually, like, I stepped back and looked, and there was something else happening there.
Yeah, this book with these 4 generations of women, Granny is really an interesting character. And when I was reading and I was thinking about her, and the idea of the struggle, right, and struggle in general. Mm-hmm. Is that something that when you were writing about, you knew that you were early on, you were writing about? Did you want to write about the struggle that these women are going through, or was it something else?
I think that what I was really focused on was the women's relationship to one another, and in that was certainly colored through and through with the struggle of their lives in relationships with one another sometimes, but outside, and I think that where my interest really rested and continues to be when I think about the work and talk about it is really in the women's relationships to one another and how these outside forces push and pull at them, and how, sure, they struggle with one another, but ultimately, despite the outside forces, I feel almost like that their relationship and connection to one another gets stronger as the world around them, whether it's men or poverty or literally the forces of the weather, they are pulling together as things around them increase, the struggle perhaps increases. So I think that my focus was almost always on their relationships, and that's where the heart of the story felt to me, maybe in every story, but certainly in the book as a whole, and I just wanted to key in on that and try my best to bring that to life, this sort of like connection and care that I feel that those characters have for one another.
Yeah, and I think you do a really, really great job, describing that sort of connection between the women. And I mean, are there any? I guess thinking about this book, now you won the Plimpton Prize at the Paris Review, which I don't know if people understand how big that is, but that is an enormous prize to win. In fact, Otessa Moshfegh won it as a previous winner. Emma Klein, and they have both gone on to develop into these very, very successful women writers. And how does, when you won the Plimpton Prize, was that really a changing sort of part of your writing career for you? Or, because I know that was last year, correct? It's been 1 year. Did that really change the scope of what you were thinking about, or as a writer, or?
I don't know. Like, I mean, like on a very like literal level, it helped me continue to just focus on writing, and helped me, pay bills and help pay for childcare, like it on a very literal level, like an award like that, that comes with a substantial chunk of money, can just help a writer so much. So, I mean, in that sense, it certainly helped, and shifted things. And in terms of the scope, like it felt really, really great to get the email. I mean, it's like, I don't really come, like, I don't know, for the longest time in grad school, someone was talking about the Paris Review, and I was like, that's in Paris, right? I don't know. And I got laughed out of the room. I just, it's not really like the world I came from. I was unfamiliar with, the literary world like that. So I didn't know that the Plimpton Prize existed, and I got an email telling me that I'd won it. So, right. I mean, it opened my eyes, and it's suddenly like, oh, I got to go to New York and got to sort of see what a very, very fancy publishing party looks like. So on that hand, it was a great and exciting experience. But at that point, Grove had acquired the book. So it was just sort of a great thing that, oh, this is going to help us on our path to publishing the book. But the book, is already in the hands of a great publishing house and a great editor at that point. So it was just sort of like these like great things are happening. So it felt really good.
Yeah. I wasn't aware that you had already sold the book before you won the prize. Interesting.
They were pretty close. I can't remember how far apart those two things happened, but they were pretty close. But I was already working with Elizabeth. And the year before, she had a debut author who had won the Plimpton Prize, Isabella Hamad, which was kind of cool.
Yeah, and she has that big book out also, right? That
The Parisian.
The Parisian, that came out last fall. In fact, she was the National Book Foundation. She was one of the 5 under 35 writers.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So, but you're the first Native writer to win that prize. In fact, or in the first Native woman writer to win that, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
I'm not sure. Maybe.
I think it is. Yeah, which is a big. I don't know if people have made a big enough deal about that. Because that's a big deal. And we were talking some, about some of our favorite Native writers and who write. I think both of us really love, of course, Louise Erdrich is, just an amazing writer, and it's been a big influence on my work, as well as people like James Welch and Momaday. But some of the newer writers, we were talking about, our mutual friend, Dave Wyden.
Mm-hmm.
David Hesco Wombley Wyden has a book out, coming out, called Winter Counts, that I read a few months back. That's more of a sort of mystery that's really, really good. And what can you talk a little bit about, like, who are some of you're excited about, that Native writers that have books coming out?
Sure. I was just on a panel with a writer named Billy Ray Belcourt, and he has a book that sounds really exciting. What is it called? Is it A History of My Brief Body? And it sounds like it's a memoir, but perhaps sort of hybrid in form. I think he's a poet as well. But that one is exciting. You mentioned Dave's book. I just got Stephen Graham Jones's new book in the mail, The Only Good Indians. And so that's an exciting one, quite honest. Like, he's so great. And I'm a little bit, have trouble sleeping at night if I watch a scary movie or anything. So I'm a little scared to read it, but he's so great. So I've got to dive in there. I've got to toughen up. So I'm excited about that one. That one's sitting in my stack. What else? It seems like there's so much happening. You know, at some point, I hope that we will talk a little bit about your new book, because the cover is gorgeous. You all just revealed the cover, and I'm so excited that pre-order links are up now.
Well, thank you. Thanks. That means a lot. But we really want to celebrate you tonight. In fact, I was just saying, I'm wearing my S.E. Hinton Rules t-shirt, right? Because S.E. Hinton rules, but we need to get one that says Kelli Jo Ford rules on here. And
one day, I've got some dues to pay. You know, one day maybe.
You know, from Oklahoma. Also, Rilla Askew is Rilla probably is watching. I don't know if she is or not, but she might be. But this would be good for one of Oklahoma's best.
Right. Yeah, I almost wore my Magic City book shirt, but I was afraid that I would be like wearing the band t-shirt to the concert.
Yeah, no. But you know, we also have a mutual friend, Erica Worth, who is a young Native writer who is really doing interesting things and is such a great advocate for Native writers. And but it's really I'm really, you know, excited about Cricket Hallelujah is, to get back to the book a little bit, that, you know, for the people who haven't read it, you know, these interconnected stories that, you know, take place in this town that feels so, I guess what I'm thinking is it's so important to the book, the play, the setting, right? And that's based, the town is based off of somewhere that you know personally, right? Can you talk a little bit about the setting for the book, and then also about how it functions for the book in an important way?
Sure. Yeah. So the book starts in a fictional town called Beulah Springs, a fictional town set in the Cherokee Nation in Sequoyah County, and that's where the first third of the book or so takes place. And then Justine and Reney, who I mentioned before, who are the two youngest generations in the family, they moved to North Texas. It's sort of weird, sort of a fictional town called Bonita. There is this tiny, tiny town that's not really a town anymore called Bonita, but that's not the town that I wrote. I really liked that name for the story I was telling. So I just sort of stole the town's name, despite the fact that it already exists. So, but yeah, and I mean, you know, the some of the bones of the book certainly like follows my life path. You know, it's fiction, the characters are characters, and they get to lead their own lives and make their own mistakes and have their own adventures and loves. But they were inspired by the places and the women I come from. You know, so the North Texas town that I created is very similar to the one I moved to when I was a girl, after I left the Cherokee Nation and moved to Texas. And so those are places that feel very, very natural to write about. You know, I don't really know how people write about a landscape that they don't know, because and obviously people do it beautifully, but it's an unfamiliar thing to me, because I feel like, for me to really, really feel like I write a landscape, I want to feel as if it's pouring out of me, and not that there's not hard work and craft and revision that goes into that, like this pouring forth. But, you know, like when you really, really feel a place in your bones, that's when I feel most at home on the page writing it. And so, you know, and I kind of think of weather as landscape as well. And the weather plays a big role in the book. And anybody who's lived, you know, in Oklahoma and North Texas knows that weather is a big part of our lives, you know, and it influences your day-to-day actions, and not just actions, emotions, you know. Like I was, I don't know, I guess I was kind of a nervous kid. Like there's a story, you know, where a tornado comes and the kid Reney runs into the cellar before anyone, and she says that's what she always did. I mean, that comes straight from me. There was when I was a little girl, that was me. I would be the first one to the cellar. I just, you know, and the cellar was set up kind of neat down there, and it, you know, there were books and coal oil lamps and stuff, and I would just be like, I love you all. I hope to see you later. I'll be in the cellar, you know. Yeah. So, and once I ran to my neighbor's cellar, who was an elderly man, when we didn't have a cellar, and later the storm was gone and he came down to get some, like, I don't know, jarred peppers or something. And he came down there, and there I sat, and it was sort of funny and awkward because he didn't know I'd gone to his cellar. It was fine, but, you know. So, you know, like the landscape, including the weather, just really, I feel like it just sort of, I absorbed it through my lifetime. And then it just sort of like, it wanted to come out in this book. And like I said, like from the very first story that I wrote in an undergraduate intro workshop, it was coming from these places. Yeah.
So much atmospheric detail, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, with weather and I mean, I talk about that a lot in, you know, with students, is how important that is. I think you do a really lovely job, right?
Thank you.
With that, grounding us in those atmospheric details, and part of that is, you know, is the weather, of course. So, yeah, the idea to go back to the connected stories, right? Because it in hearing you, and you were saying that, you know, you're originally thinking of it being a book of connected stories, but I think it feels very much like a novel. Mm-hmm. I mean, and I'm always interested in, you know, in structure, in how books are structured, and you know, it feels very much like it was not written as they were not written in separate stories at different times. Did you write some of the later stories before the ones that are earlier, in terms of the way that, you know, the chronology of?
For sure.
And because I do know that there was one story that wasn't even placed in the book that you left out. And had you written one of the later, I guess we could say stories, I want to say chapter.
You can call them chapters. I mean,
I mean, that's what I'm saying. That's what it feels very much like a novel, but, you know.
Mm-hmm. But let's call them chapters with titles. So the very first story, in terms of when I wrote them, that's included in the book, is one of the later stories. It's one of the fire stories. It's the story called Bonita. And that's the earliest story that made it into the book. And I wrote that when I was in getting an MFA. And then, but most of the stories were later. And trying to think what all I added. Like the story that took me the longest to write was the very first story. And I think that's very much because I had all of these other stories and I needed to figure out a way. We talked about this a little bit with your class. I needed to find a way to launch this narrative that was going to hopefully have some sort of, it was hopefully going to propel the story and the connections and the movement of these women over the course of all of the chapters, you know, which sort of have a kind of a collage effect, I think. You know, yeah. There is forward movement, but you're getting different perspectives on the action from different characters, and you move around in time. But so the very first story was probably the hardest to write, certainly one of the hardest, and it took the longest because I needed to figure out how to set up a lot of things.
Yeah.
Like the church, the Holiness Church would be unfamiliar to most readers, I would imagine. This family with their own specific lives and relationships to one another, you know, and the father who's gone missing, the young teenage Reney who gets pregnant in this chapter. There were just a lot of things that I needed to set up, kind of a culture, and as well as just like, it was really important to me to hang on to the roller coaster. Like, you know, that was sort of how I discovered where to start the book, was this idea of this young girl whose mother is so religious and she's in this church and she just wants to ride a roller coaster, but it's considered worldly, you know, to her church.
Yeah.
And she wants to do this very childish thing as she's dealing with this thing that no child should have to deal with. So, you know, there were a lot of sort of balls in the air with that story. And so it took me a long time to pull it all together. And once I did, though, it really did, I think, help shape the book as a novel.
Yeah.
I think.
I definitely. Do you find it difficult to write about violence or domestic violence?
I do. Sometimes in my life more than others, I think, depending on what's going on around me. But I do. And, you know, I said the first story was the hardest to write, and that was the hardest to write on kind of a technical craft level. There are some of the earlier stories when there's domestic violence happening, to young Justine and her daughter Reney is there in witness. And those were really, I struggled quite a bit to sit with those once I had written them, and I need to go back and revise and rework and make connections and do all that kind of work. It took me quite a while because there were days that I just could, like, my heart couldn't really take it. Yeah. Do you? I mean, I know you have a lot of the same themes in your work.
Yeah, I do. It's hard. Yeah, and that's where I was interested in what you were. I mean, you know, especially anything, you know, domestic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I was thinking of the scene, you know, with the young girl, you know, and you know, witnessing. So, you know, depending on the point of view, none of it is it doesn't matter what point of view you're writing from.
Mm-hmm.
It's all very, very difficult. I mean, if you're writing it from a very distant third person narrator,
mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
You know, even an objective, you know, it just doesn't feel like it's, of course, one can say that all writing is difficult, which is very true.
Sure.
That there are those scenes that it's almost that you have to be sort of, you know, you have to be mentally prepared for.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, it feels like acting, maybe, in a way. I mean, I haven't acted since I was in elementary school, you know, but I mean,
mm-hmm.
or junior high or something. But you know, I mean, you know, you're sort of getting into, you know, this role, and so yeah, I was curious. I find it very difficult to do. But you do it so well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, it feels, I mean, you know, when you experience, and readers know this, when you experience good writing, it's like what Pat was saying, he's using that very strong adverb, ferociously turning pages, right? But when the writing is good, when the prose is good, you get into that space of lost time, right, as a reader, and before you know it, you look up at the clock and it's, wow, it's been an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Which is what we do as writers. I think we get into that space of, when things are going well, right? But when the prose is good, and I think as a teacher of writing, when it's done poorly, right? When any kind of, especially violence, right? When it's done poorly, it becomes such a stumbling block and difficult to get through, right? Here are the issues. But so that's just a compliment that I was curious how difficult it was for you.
Thank you. Yeah, there were days it was really, really hard, and I might sit with it and hardly make any progress just because it was emotionally, it was tough to sit with. There were things going on. There was like a terrible incident with our neighbors, with children involved. While I was supposed to be revising those stories, and I just couldn't do it, and I just had to come clean with my editor, who's wonderful and lovely, and just say, this thing happened, and I just almost cannot do this work right now. And so it can be really tough, but I think it's important, if that's an important part of your story, to figure out how to face it and figure out how you best can handle it. I had a teacher at one point tell me, if you're going to write violence, put violence in your story, like essentially you owe it to the character in the work to make it clear and to put it on the page. And I thought about that, and not gratuitously, but to make the action clear, essentially. And I don't know, now that I've had more time and experience and written some stories with some significant violence, I don't know that I agree with that necessarily. I don't think that it has to be an action has to be clear on the page for its emotional significance to be clear. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But for a while, I that's sort of what I thought, like, well, yes, okay, if I'm going to undertake this task and do it with honor, I must make it clear whatever the action is for the readers. But I don't necessarily think that's true. What do you think?
I think I would agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I generally found that I've tended to avoid writing about violence. You know what I mean? I mean, in some ways it's, I always think it's best left to the reader sometimes, and that leaving things out sometimes is more, I tell myself, well, maybe it's more effective, sometimes, if it's too difficult. But I was thinking about what John Gardner said, which he said one time that there are only, and I'm just curious if you agree with this, right? He said there are only two plots. That one is that a person goes on a journey, and the other is a stranger comes to town. Do you agree with that, or would you? I mean, he probably said that in 1977,
right?
But
I don't know. I feel like we could sit down with a whole stack of beautiful books, and we could figure out which category they fit into. I think that is a category you can break books into. It seems to ring true, but I don't know. I feel like someone quicker on their feet could immediately come up with an exception, but I don't know. Can you?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that that's true anymore. Maybe at one time it was. I don't know so much anymore. But I always like to ask people that, what the, John Gardner, and I am I love the art of fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually like some of his fiction, but some of the things he said, I don't know if they're dated now. They feel kind of dated, maybe, but he's still very much, taught in the classroom, I know.
I have that book.
Yeah, the art of fiction. Yeah. Maybe, so we're at 6:45. I wonder if I want to give people who are listening a chance, or maybe Pat can, if there are any questions that.
Yes. There's a few questions that have popped up in here. The first one comes from Sam, and Sam wants to know, what period of time did the story take place? How many years of time did it span?
Good question. It starts in 1974, and then it goes to near future. So, I don't know.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. We had one that had been sent in to us in advance. This is from Jay. He used to work with Lost City Schools in Cherokee County, and they've since closed. And he knows that the school made preserving and teaching the Cherokee language a top priority. Do you know if there are any measures being taken to preserve the Cherokee language for the next generation at surrounding schools?
I haven't lived in the Cherokee Nation for a long time. So Brandon might be able to speak to this. I'm sure he could speak to this better than I can, but I know the Cherokee Nation does have a language program, perhaps multiple language programs, because they have programs for little children, school age kids, and there are programs right now that we could sign up for online. So I do think it's important to the nation to preserve the language, or I know that it is. Brandon, do you have more specific things that you're aware of?
I actually don't have anything any more specific than that. I haven't been, I've been in New Mexico for just over a year, so I don't know. There might be somebody else who knows, that would be able to answer that better than us. But it's definitely important to preserve the language.
Yeah, I mean, and right, and the Cherokee Nation it seems like they put resources as well into just sort of spreading awareness that language is important. They have their word of the day. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if it's on television, locally, but I see the word of the day on, the internet and stuff. And so I think they're doing good work to try to keep it going.
Well, yeah, I think, and you may be talking about the OCO, the TV program.
Yeah.
That's
great. We had another question. This guest has read one of the reviews of your book in which the reviewer hoped that your characters might, quote, evolve in dramatic and profound ways instead of remaining, quote, passive and long-suffering. And they say, no shade on the New York Times, but this comment infuriates them. Since when is literature aspirational? How often in real life do we evolve in dramatic and profound ways? Do you have any thoughts on publishing industry, maybe asking writers to describe what we want versus what is?
Brandon, do you have any thoughts on that one?
Not really. No, I don't.
Yeah.
What was the question again?
So the question is sort of basically, how often in real life do we evolve in dramatic and profound ways? Is that, I mean, should the characters, should it be a criticism that the characters don't evolve and that they remain passive and long suffering? I think is one part of it. And then the second part of the question is a publishing industry question, I guess, asking writers to describe what we want versus what is. So publishing to blame for this, that the reviewer is so used to having characters evolve in dramatic and profound ways that that when they don't, a book is criticized, or it's a point of criticism if the reviewer feels that they didn't evolve?
I don't know how to even begin to address that question, like off the top of my head.
Right.
I mean, I sit down and think about it and write a response, but
Yes.
this is why, doing readings are very difficult, is because, you get very difficult questions, and that I'm not prepared for. So
I'll try. Thank you for the
go ahead.
question. Yeah, thank you for the question and for the comment. I really appreciate it. It was those were tough lines to read for sure, and this is a new experience for me as a debut novelist. It's like, oh, my baby. But I think that, it's fair that as a reader, we come to a book with our own expectations for satisfaction, right? That, if for a certain reader, sort of a bootstrap story is what feels satisfying, and you don't get that from a book, that's fair, that the book wasn't one that you liked. I think that's fair. I do hope that books are judged for what they're trying to do, and that characters who come from different backgrounds, who have different socioeconomic hurdles that other characters might not have, that those sort of structures that might prevent bootstrapping could be acknowledged or recognized, if that makes sense. I don't know, but reviewers and readers, they're going to like books and not like books, and they'll have their own reasons. Sure. and that's fair, for sure.
Well, and one of the things just from the bookstore, it's, first COVID and the response and kind of back and forth that's happened with that. But then also in the wake of George Floyd's murder and the protests that have come out with that. And of course, in Tulsa, having that Trump rally in June and kind of really ratcheting everything up into a different way. Nonfiction books that have been at the top of the bestseller list for the last month and a half, 2 months, have been dealing with issues of race. But there's a lot to be gained from the fiction that's out there and the stories that are told. And we've got some excellent novelists. We did an event with Colson Whitehead a couple of weeks ago for the paperback release of The Nickel Boys. I lead a book club that read Jesmyn Ward earlier in this year. And both of those I would recommend to people wanting this kind of stuff, but also your work, both of you, on Native issues and just that there's a lot to be gained from novels and from just seeing things from a different perspective. And I think that's, to me, where this is coming from. The characters didn't evolve in a way that the reviewer liked. Okay. I mean, that it was the truth for them and the truth for the writer. And I think that I would object to that criticism too. But I think that there's a lot to be gained from reading fiction and in seeing the world from a different perspective, and that people should read a mix of both fiction and nonfiction.
Yeah. Thanks.
Mary has a question. First, she wants you to know that she's really enjoying the book and she loves the title, and she's just curious as to how you chose the title Crooked Hallelujah.
Thank you, Mary. And the title was one of those things that was there with me all along. It just it was one of those things that kind of sprung forth like the landscape in the book. I didn't have to reach far for it, and I don't know why. It felt natural. I think that as much as it's a book about mothers and daughters, it's a book about questions of belief and faith, and and so it just felt natural. I never really questioned it. I was open to other titles, as you work on a book for that long, the question comes up, is this the right title? But I was always open to something different, but nothing ever felt right.
Yeah. Great. We have another question here. Someone that grew up in rural Oklahoma and often writes about it and uses it as a setting of their stories. And they say that they understand that when they're writing, it's an internalized experience of Oklahoma and not the Oklahoma that other people, especially their family who still live in the same town, experienced. So then they're mortified for them or anyone from Oklahoma to read the stories thinking that they're distorting the place or stacking the against it and giving it an unfair representation. So how do you deal with the real place versus the imagined place in your fiction? And how do you feel about your family reading what you write?
Those are really interesting questions, and we could go sit down with in a fainting couch, and we could have a therapy appointment about that, because that's one of my biggest cares in writing the book is that people from home can look at it and feel like it feels like someplace that they might know, or it feels like someplace they might meet in those places. So it feels very important to me to get it right. And, and again, I'm writing fictional places, but they're very much inspired by places I know. So it feels important to get the feeling of the place right, and of the people who might come from those places. And so I think that the only thing that I can do, rather than shy away from those kinds of things, if that's what I'm being drawn to write toward, is do my best as a writer and a person sitting at the keyboard to have empathy in everything that I'm doing, and probably going to get some things wrong, and try to if I'm and try to recognize and acknowledge and do better for when that happens. But
right.
Yeah.
Well, and being from a place versus that you didn't have any choice about can be very different than choosing to be in a place. And I think for me, I have tended to be the most critical of books set in Tulsa because I didn't grow up in Tulsa, and so I remember a book a few years ago that was set in Tulsa and people really enjoyed it, but I couldn't wrap my head around it because it was sort of how I felt about the place I did grow up. It's not Tulsa. And so it's hard for me to kind of see in that same way. I'm like, this, dope didn't drop past 61st Street. And so what do they know about?
Right.
But I feel that same way about the town I grew up in that I haven't lived in since I was 18. So yeah, I think it's always interesting and hard to do, but if you kind of keep those folks in mind like you have, it's going to come through.
Yeah, hopefully.
Nan wants to know, what books did you most love to read as a child?
I was asked this question recently, and I realized that my favorite books when I was a child were the dog dying, heartbreak your heart stories, like Old Yeller and Where the Red Fern Grows. And the one that I read the most was A Dog Called Kitty, but they all sort of end with the same childhood heartbreak. And I don't know why. I've always been drawn to those kinds of stories. I think they're about loneliness and finding connection where you can, and then just like great love dashed against the rocks.
Yeah, great. Jay says that he can relate to the relatives that were religious fanatics in your book. And do you have any familiarity with the Pentecostal church growing up that you wrote about?
Yes, I do have some familiarity. Yeah. But I hope that when I wrote about religion, in the first story, I think that there are some people who are religious who are not very good people and who treat young Justine unkindly. But for the most part, I feel like my attitude toward most of the religious people in the book is that they are people who are also just doing their best, and they have a set of beliefs, and they're very courageous to live according to them. There aren't, a lot of us who can do so steadfastly. So hopefully I've treated them with empathy and respect too.
Great.
That's certainly how I feel as a person, aside from a writer,
Right. Yeah. And then I think this is going to be a good one for us to end on. We've got somebody that'd like to tell the audience about the room that you're in and what the pages on the wall behind you represent there.
Oh, sure. Yeah. My husband and I share this office, and he is also a writer and a teacher. And what you see back there are some of his poems. And we have a 7-year-old daughter, and the bottom right corner is she's drawn a cover for his next book. So that's her artwork.
Nice.
She's drawn covers for both of our books. So
Excellent.
So that's mostly what you see. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, I want to thank you both for joining us tonight and spending some of your time with us and our community of readers here in Tulsa. And we're just so thrilled that you spend a little bit of time with us. We're very excited for you, Kelli Jo, and with this debut novel, and look forward to keeping, putting it in readers' hands as they're able to come into the store. We do have links to purchase Kelli Jo's book in the chat function tonight. And if you go to magiccitybooks.com, there's a link for the virtual event store, and that's got all of the books from our virtual events from the past couple of weeks and our future events in the next couple of weeks. That's also where you're able to pre-order books. There are some, big new releases that are scheduled for later this year and into next year. And one of those big ones is Brandon's next novel, Removed, which is coming in February. Also available there, it might be of interest to some of our guests tonight, is the new Native American poetry anthology that Joy Harjo edited for Norton. That's coming out at the end of August, and so that's going to be coming at the end of August, and you can pre-order it through Magic City Books, so that when it comes out on that day, you're able to get it. Just about everything is available to ship across the country, or you can come into the store and pick it up, and that option exists kind of for whatever book that you might be interested in. But we know that some of you are joining us from far away, and mailing them to you works best. So thank you both again very much for being with us tonight. Best of luck with everything, and we hope to see you in person in Tulsa very soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Pat. Thanks everyone for joining us. And Brandon, it was so good to talk to you. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. Thanks for asking me, Kelli. And thanks, Pat. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right.
Good night,
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, bye.